In this episode, we start with a subject that often confuses new learners because it seems to pull in two ideas that almost sound like opposites at first. Encryption is meant to protect information from being read by the wrong people, while traffic security monitoring is meant to help defenders notice threats moving across the network. That can make a beginner wonder how a security analyst is supposed to watch for danger if more and more of the traffic is intentionally hidden from view. The answer is that both goals are valid. Both are necessary, and modern security work depends on understanding how to protect data without giving up all visibility into risky behavior. Once you see how encryption works at a high level and how analysts still learn from context, patterns, metadata, and surrounding signals, this topic becomes much less mysterious and much more practical. At the most basic level, encryption is the process of transforming readable data into a protected form so that only someone with the right key can turn it back into something understandable. Its main job is to keep information confidential while it is stored or transmitted, especially when that information might pass through places the organization does not fully control. Without encryption, usernames, passwords, emails, documents, and session data could be exposed far more easily to eavesdropping, interception, or theft. That is why encryption is not a luxury feature or an advanced extra for special cases. It is one of the normal expectations of a modern digital environment. For a CISA Plus learner, the important point is that encryption does not exist just to satisfy compliance rules or make systems look sophisticated. It exists because unprotected traffic creates a direct path to data exposure, account compromise, and loss of trust, even when the rest of the environment seems well defended. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. It helps to think about data in two broad states, because security needs change depending on where the data is and what is happening to it. Data at rest refers to information stored on a disk, in a database, on a mobile device, or in some other persistent location. Data in transit refers to information moving from one place to another, such as from a laptop to a website, from an application to a database, or from one service to another across the network. The title of this episode is mainly concerned with traffic, so the spotlight is on protecting data in transit. When traffic is encrypted, a person who captures packets on the network should not be able to read the actual contents without the proper keys. That reduces the chance of credential theft, session hijacking, and disclosure of sensitive business information. At the same time, defenders still need to understand whether the traffic itself is normal, suspicious, risky, or clearly malicious, which is where traffic security monitoring enters the picture. A beginner should also understand that encryption is not one single magic action performed the same way in every situation. Different methods exist, but the most useful starting distinction is between shared key approaches and paired key approaches. In a shared key model, both sides use the same secret key for locking and unlocking the data, which can be efficient but creates the challenge of protecting that shared secret. In a paired key model, one key is used to encrypt and a different but mathematically related key is used to decrypt, which helps solve trust problems during secure communication setup. You do not need deep mathematics to understand the security value here. What matters is knowing that encryption depends on keys, and keys must be protected carefully because the security of the encrypted data rests on them. If the key is stolen, weak, reused carelessly, or managed badly, the presence of encryption may look reassuring on paper while offering much less real protection than the organization assumes. When secure web communication is discussed, you will often hear about transport layer security, TLS, because it is one of the most common ways modern systems protect data moving across networks. TLS helps create a protected session between two parties so that information sent during that session is harder for outsiders to read or tamper with. Part of that process involves digital certificates, which help establish trust by linking a public key to an identity in a way that other systems can evaluate. For a beginner, the simplest way to view a certificate is as a form of digital proof that helps one side decide whether the other side is likely to be who it claims to be. This is not perfect trust in an absolute sense, but it is an important part of building secure communication. Analysts care about this because the presence, quality, age, issuer, and behavior of certificates can all provide clues about whether encrypted traffic is part of normal business activity or part of something suspicious. That leads into the monitoring side of the discussion, because traffic security monitoring is not limited to reading message contents line by line. Monitoring means observing network behavior to identify patterns, anomalies, threats, policy violations, and signs of compromise. In the past, defenders could sometimes rely more heavily on visible packet contents because a greater share of traffic moved without strong encryption. Today, that is no longer a safe assumption, and in many environments it would be undesirable anyway because the lack of encryption would expose users and systems to unnecessary risk. As a result, analysts must become skilled at learning from the information that remains observable around encrypted sessions. They look at where traffic goes, when it happens, how often it occurs, how much data moves, what protocol behavior is present, which systems are involved, and whether the communication makes sense in context. In other words, strong monitoring does not disappear when traffic becomes encrypted. It becomes more contextual and more dependent on disciplined analysis. One of the most important concepts here is metadata, which is the information about a communication rather than the protected content inside it. Even when the message body is encrypted, an analyst may still see the source and destination addresses, ports, timing, session duration, data volume, certificate details, frequency of contact, and directional patterns in the connection. That information can be extremely valuable. If an internal accounting system suddenly begins communicating every few minutes with an unfamiliar external location at unusual hours, the encrypted contents may remain unreadable, but the behavior itself can still be highly suspicious. The same is true if a user workstation that normally talks to a small set of business services suddenly starts making many short, encrypted connections to a wide range of rare destinations. Metadata does not reveal everything, and it should not be treated as a substitute for all other evidence. But it often gives analysts enough visibility to identify a problem worth investigating before a breach becomes larger and harder to contain. Traffic monitoring also depends on understanding normal behavior, because suspicious traffic is often suspicious only when compared to a baseline. A secure connection to a cloud service might be expected for one department and highly unusual for another. Large encrypted transfers late at night may be routine for backup infrastructure, but alarming for a receptionist's laptop. This is why analysts spend so much effort learning what regular patterns look like inside their own environment. Normal business applications create repeated communication habits over time, and those habits help build expectations around destination types, frequency, volume, and timing. Once those expectations exist, outliers become easier to spot. For beginners, this is an important mindset shift. You are not always trying to decode every packet or catch something dramatic in plain text. Often you are comparing behavior against what should be happening and asking whether the encrypted session fits the role of the system, the user, the time of day, and the business process the organization expects to see. Attackers understand the value of encryption too, and they often use it to hide malicious activity inside what looks like ordinary secure traffic. Malware may communicate with a remote controller over encrypted channels. Stolen data may be exfiltrated through encrypted sessions to reduce the chance of easy content inspection. A compromised system may use legitimate secure services as cover because defenders are less likely to block them without a careful reason. This does not mean encryption is bad. It means protective technologies can be used by both defenders and attackers, depending on who controls them and for what purpose. That is a common pattern across cybersecurity. A beginner should avoid the mistake of assuming that encrypted traffic is automatically safe simply because encryption is generally associated with good security practice. Secure transport can protect a legitimate banking session, but it can also protect the communications of ransomware, spyware, or a remote access Trojan. The analyst's job is to judge the behavior and context around the encryption, not merely to celebrate the existence of encryption itself. Certificate behavior can provide especially useful clues during monitoring because certificates leave behind information that analysts can examine even when the session content remains protected. For example, A certificate that is expired, self-issued in an unusual context, tied to a mismatched identity, or suddenly appearing on a system with no business reason to present it may suggest trouble. Analysts may also care about whether a certificate chain looks trustworthy, whether the same certificate appears across many suspicious systems, or whether a server that should be internal is unexpectedly trying to establish encrypted sessions outward using strange credentials. None of these signs automatically prove malicious activity, but they help narrow attention and guide triage. This is important because traffic monitoring is rarely based on a single dramatic clue. It is often a process of combining moderate signals into a stronger judgment. A strange certificate, unusual timing, rare destination, abnormal data volume, and a newly changed process on the same host together may tell a much more convincing story than any one of those facts would tell on its own. At some points, organizations may choose to inspect encrypted traffic more deeply through controlled decryption at specific security boundaries. But this idea brings trade-offs that beginners should understand clearly. Decrypting traffic for inspection can improve visibility because it allows security tools to look for malware, policy violations, or sensitive data moving where it should not. At the same time, it introduces privacy, performance, trust, and management concerns. The organization must protect the inspection process itself, handle sensitive information carefully, and avoid creating a new weak point where decrypted data becomes exposed. It also cannot be assumed that all encrypted traffic should always be decrypted just because the technology exists. Some categories of traffic may carry special legal, ethical, or operational considerations. The key lesson is not that decryption is always good or always bad. It is that visibility and privacy must be balanced deliberately, and analysts should understand why some environments inspect more traffic while others rely more on metadata, endpoint evidence, and selective review instead. Another important reality is that traffic monitoring becomes much stronger when it is combined with information from the systems generating the traffic. A suspicious encrypted session on its own may raise questions, but those questions become easier to answer when you also know whether the host recently launched an unfamiliar process, whether a user account logged in from an unusual location, whether a file integrity alert appeared, or whether antivirus and endpoint controls recorded strange behavior. This broader view matters because encrypted traffic is often one symptom of something larger rather than a complete story by itself. A single signal rarely tells you everything you want to know. Analysts build confidence by connecting network activity to host events, identity events, asset criticality, and timing. For brand new learners, this is a useful reminder that cybersecurity analysis is often about correlation, not isolated facts. Good defenders do not stare only at packets or only at endpoints. They try to connect the dots across multiple sources so encrypted communication can be understood in its true context. There are also several misconceptions worth clearing away because they can distort how beginners think about this subject. One misconception is that encryption makes monitoring impossible, which is not true. It removes some visibility, especially into contents, but it does not remove all visibility, and it certainly does not eliminate the need for analysis. Another misconception is that more encryption always means the environment is automatically more secure in every practical sense. Strong encryption is beneficial, but if the keys are handled poorly, the certificates are mismanaged, or malicious systems are communicating freely inside encrypted tunnels, real risk still exists. A third misconception is that suspicious traffic always looks obviously hostile. Much of the time it does not. It may resemble legitimate secure business communication closely enough that only pattern analysis, baselines, and contextual awareness reveal the difference. For CASA Plus students, that is a major lesson because many real investigations depend more on disciplined reasoning than on seeing some glaring piece of text that immediately announces the presence of an attacker. A simple example can tie the ideas together. Imagine an employee laptop that normally connects to a few internal services, a common productivity platform, and several trusted business websites during standard working hours. Then, over the course of 2 days, it starts making regular encrypted outbound connections every 15 minutes to an external destination the organization has never seen before, including late at night when the user is not active. The traffic volume is modest, the content cannot be read directly, and nothing in the connection by itself screams disaster. But when an analyst compares the behavior to the baseline, notices the rare destination, sees that a newly launched process began around the same time, and discovers that the system also downloaded an unexpected attachment earlier in the week, the picture changes. The encrypted traffic is no longer just a secure session. It becomes a likely indicator of malicious communication, possibly command activity or slow data theft. That is how traffic security monitoring works in practice, by combining encryption awareness with behavioral judgment. By the end of this discussion, the big idea should feel much clearer. Encryption protects data in transit, supports confidentiality and trust, and has become a basic expectation in modern computing rather than an optional enhancement. Traffic security monitoring exists alongside that protection, not against it, and it gives defenders ways to notice misuse, compromise, and abnormal behavior even when message contents are not directly readable. Analysts rely on metadata, baselines, certificate details, host context, and pattern recognition to decide whether encrypted sessions make sense or deserve closer attention. They may also use deeper inspection in selected cases, but always with an understanding that visibility comes with trade-offs and responsibilities. For a new CASB Plus learner, the lasting takeaway is that encryption and monitoring are not enemies. They are both essential parts of a mature security posture, and the skill is learning how to preserve privacy and protection while still seeing enough of the environment to recognize when secure-looking traffic is carrying insecure intent.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.